I've always loved the cosmic horror genre and Lovecraftian themed movies. I've been indulging in many forms of media that involve these tropes lately, except for video games. So I started to think about what games were specifically based around Lovecraft or the Cthulhu mythos, and I really only found a couple of them worth noting, which are the Call of Cthulhu, the Sinking City, and last but not least, the Sucker for Love. Ooh, you think them big ass bazookas got suction cups on them? But they weren't really scratching that cosmic itch I was looking for. So I started to think a little bit deeper about the Lovecraftian elements itself and realized they're everywhere in games. From having to search for lore to understand the bigger picture, to old or elden gods, to scary moons threatening to destroy your planet, let's see how Lovecraft has been lurking in the shadows of games all this time. Before we really dive in, let me explain what I mean by Lovecraftian elements. If you don't know who H.P. Lovecraft is, he was a writer back in the day that lived from 1890 to 1937, and most known for his work The Call of Cthulhu and the Cthulhu mythos, which include many godly and monstrous creatures beyond our understanding. He's basically the father of the cosmic horror subgenre that we know today. If you don't know who Cthulhu is, you most definitely know that face, that towering form. An overwhelmingly massive humanoid body and a head that resembles an octopus with eyes that can drive you insane. You could find inspirations from Cthulhu everywhere in media, but I'm not here just to talk about where you can find Cthulhu in games. I want to talk about the Lovecraftian elements as a whole in video games. A quote from Lovecraft was, "The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown." This overall encapsulates the kind of stories that he wrote. Some other elements in Lovecraft's writing is how insignificant we are as a species, and his writings all reflected this, with some type of old god doing whatever it wants to humans, and humans being able to do absolutely nothing to stop them. So where do these elements show up in video games? Almost all of FromSoft games have multiple layers of Lovecraftian elements inside of them, from Armored Core to all the Souls games, and probably the best example, Bloodborne. The only ones I'm gonna touch on from FromSoft are two of their games, which are Armored Core because of its unique take on the subject, and Bloodborne because it's really able to capture what I'm trying to say out of all their Souls games. Now, Armored Core as a whole doesn't really seem like there's much of these Lovecraftian elements from the gameplay alone. At first glance, all it looks like is a mech action game. But if you dive a little deeper into the story, this is where Lovecraft is hiding away. In Armored Core, there's an energy source called Koro on a planet you play through named Rumicon. Now, this Koro is a gas type of substance that can provide massive amounts of energy. But the problem with this is it's highly flammable. Not just a little, but enough to burn a whole star system, leaving nothing but destruction and ash. This has caused many parties to fight over exactly what to do with this substance. As you continue through the story, the gas eventually gets inside of you, the player, and you come to find out that the Koro is in fact sentient with a mind of its own. Now, this is where the Lovecraftian elements kick in. The Koro is, at the end of the day, a threat to every living being in the universe if it's able to spread, which it does in one of the endings. And once this spread of Koro occurs, there's nothing anybody can do about it. You're basically at the mercy of what these beings in the Koro want to do, whether good or bad. But at the end of the day, if it's the most powerful force, who makes up what good or bad truly is at this point? And this is Lovecraftian to the core. Another thing I want to add about the Koro is you're not really able to kill or destroy it completely. It's always able to rise up from whatever destruction attempted against it in the past. So overall, this Koro is bound to spread eventually, no matter how much time passes. Nobody is really able to completely destroy this entity. Now, with Bloodborne, the best element of Lovecraft to me is the insight system. As you progress through the game, you'll gain more insight, and with this comes the veil of a world behind our own being lifted, and you'll see what's truly lurking behind. And seeing this can make you more insane. This can be shown with a way to earn more insight. There's an item called Madman's Knowledge, and when consumed, you'll gain more insight. But in the description of this item, it states, "Skull of a madman touched by the wisdom of the great ones." This shows that having more insight can make you go more insane. This can also be reflected in the frenzy bar that fills when fighting certain enemies. When you have a higher amount of insight, this bar will fill even faster. Now, in Lovecraftian stories, there's always some type of insanity that occurs in one character or another. And in Bloodborne, I think this is the best way of showing someone slowly going insane. Now, I've sadly never been able to actually play Bloodborne because these motherfuckers won't release it on PC, but I promise you I know damn near everything there is about these systems and the story. And the story itself is truly Lovecraftian as well. People messing with something they know very little about, which ultimately leads to everyone's destruction and madness being born, cults being formed, and other worldly creatures coming out of the shadows. But for Bloodborne, I only wanted to talk about this one gameplay system because I think it's the best way to have some type of insanity meter, because insanity is a constant element in Lovecraft. Moving on to a different genre of game, World of Warcraft. No matter how you feel about the game's current state, which is pretty ass, one constant Lovecraftian element throughout all of the expansions are some type of elden god, and how they're usually behind some bigger plot yet to be seen. Let's just take N'Zoth and his design alone. Huge and tentacled with a bit too many eyes. This just screams Lovecraft. Not only that, but this old god corrupts corrupts and gets into the minds of people, promising them sweet nothings and manipulating them to do his bidding. A bit like how Cthulhu in Lovecraftian stories is able to speak to people through their dreams. Overall, almost all of WoW's lore always has some bigger and badder entity or god that has been working in the shadows scheming to accomplish whatever plot they want. I think the biggest example of Lovecraft can be portrayed through the Lich King himself. Arthas was a paladin, a knight of light, and represented everything good in this universe, who ultimately got corrupted to turn into the Lich King through whispers and false promises. Arthas never did anything wrong, by the way. The last Lovecraftian element in this game is the actual real audience themselves. People play and follow this game like a cult. No matter what happens or how bad the game can get, people will still play. It's like the game itself whispers to them like some type of elden god corrupting their mind and controlling their actions. And I only know this because I used to play WoW constantly. Even after the point I wasn't having that much fun anymore. It's crazy. Some people even ruin their lives over this game. So at the end of the day, WoW itself is basically a Lovecraftian being never truly able to be destroyed. I could go on and on talking about character designs or concepts that connect to Lovecraft, like the guy that gets corrupted in Soul Calibur and the sword turns into the weird eyeball thing, or the moon from Zelda, but that would get pretty repetitive. There's a major flaw with Lovecraft in video games, and this flaw is video games and wanting to win or beat the game. Nobody wants to lose, but the fundamentals of Lovecraft's writing is how you're unable to beat whatever is happening, and how helpless you are to do anything. So I don't think this is able to translate well over to video games, and why I think there's not many actual video games centered around Lovecraft itself, but they pull certain elements from cosmic horror instead, and I think this is the best way to use his work and translate it over to video games. Wrapping up, all this shows how Lovecraft has been lurking in the shadows of games for years now, and maybe you'll start to see him more in your favorite games, even if it seems unrelated to the genre. There still might be whispers of Cthulhu in the background without you even realizing it. If you got to this point, thanks for watching, and let me know where you may have seen this influence in the games that you play. And if you want to see more, like and subscribe, even though it takes me like a month to post.